Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
All right. Thank you for tuning into the Lone Wolf Podcast. I have my good buddy David Spurrier back with me again, joining me from sunny Florida. At least I hope it's sunny down there for you today. How you doing, man?
Yeah, it's sunny. It's another 94, 95 degree day on the way. I'm doing great. Great to be here again on the Lone Wolf Podcast, probably one of my favorite podcasts out there. So thanks for having me, Charles.
We appreciate that, and it's a pleasure to have you back on. Earlier in the week, me and Dave got together and we did a video. I'm kind of surprised, that you got to keep it up, Dave. But, it seems like it's doing pretty well over there, and YouTube isn't coming after you for it. Maybe these emails have made YouTube and the censors back off of the COVID Fauci talk a little. But we got together. We talked about Fauci's emails. If you haven't seen that video, I recommend going to check it out. But today we are going to be diving into another controversial subject, because we love to get into those around here.
Yeah.
Immigration. Okay. So a lot of people, debate back and forth on whether illegal immigration is that bad of a thing. Some people say we need it for labor purposes. Other people say that, you can't have a country without a borders type, thing. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, okay, it's always been made out, especially if you're listening to the Democrats. If you're listening to Democrats and the liberals, for the longest time, it is more or less that Republicans are just anti-illegal alien, that they're the ones who want to deport all the Mexicans. Well, Dave, I got a clip I'm going to roll here for everyone, and then I'm going to get your thoughts on it. But Kamala Harris just made some interesting remarks. And, Dave, ironically enough, it's not the first time I've ever heard a Democrat say this. It kind of harkens back to the Bill Clinton days. But she was at Guatemala. She didn't go to the border. She went to the source, okay?
Yeah.
She goes to Guatemala, and then she says the following.
And I want to emphasize that the goal of our work is to help Guatemalans find hope at home. At the same time, I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border. There are legal methods by which migration can and should occur. But we, as one of our priorities, will discourage illegal migration. And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back. So let's discourage our friends, our neighbors, our family members from embarking on what is otherwise an extremely dangerous journey.
Well, here's the thing. Kamala Harris, who was, appointed, right, at some juncture last, a couple of months ago, maybe now, to be kind of like the overseer. She would be responsible for what's happening at our southern border. She was, I guess a lot of people felt that meant she would be paying attention and finding out, why this is happening. And look, the source thing is an interesting topic. And a lot of progressives and a lot of libertarian types like to say, look, we're causing this problem. Our foreign policy is creating this problem. And thus, we have to deal with that. But what's weird, Charles, is they're not dealing with the foreign policy problem, right? They're creating more of it, if anything. So, okay, so you know how people like to talk about how when we sanction a country, it doesn't really do anything to the leadership in the country. The leadership tends to do better when we sanction the country because what they do is they extract more resources from their population. Right. And I got to tell you this, and I made this connection before we started recording this, and I thought to myself, I'm going to put this out there because it's an interesting premise. The ranchers, the farmers, the citizens along border in border communities, they had nothing to do with the federal policy when it comes to sanctioning countries in South America. All they know is that a farmer wakes up or a rancher wakes up and he's got dead cattle on his property. He's got a fence that got destroyed. His stuff, whatever that stuff is, I've heard of cars being hot wired. I've heard of pantries being ransacked, all kinds of things where people are trying to go from point A to point B and they need something to continue on their quote unquote journey. None of these people did anything wrong. And many of these people, by the way, are of Hispanic descent or heritage. And they're thinking to myself, gee, I came here, I worked hard, I built a business, or I got this nice house, I work hard as a rancher or farmer, and now my property is destroyed. And by the way, this isn't just happening along border towns. This is happening all across America in various places. So I guess my retort back to Kamala would be, number one, you're not doing anything to change the policy in South America, number one. So what you could do is allow the people along the southern border to exercise their right to protect their person and property. Okay, that would be my retort to everybody, and libertarian types too, who have kind of, and you mentioned this a little bit, where they brand people. They say, well, you're a Republican or a conservative, so you just hate Mexicans. And you know where I think they get all this is, Trump comes down the escalator when he ran for president, and he gave that so-called famous speech where he talked about, some of them are this, some of them are that. I'm not going to mention all the different things. And then at the end, I think he said something like, and I assume some of them are good people. All right. Which I think is cover for all the things that he described. Now, nobody is going to be able to, refute the idea that some of these people who are coming over don't have the best of motives. Some are legitimate asylum seekers. So what I would say, if you want to make our immigration policy a bit more fair and coherent, is that you'd figure out who the asylum seekers are, number one, okay? And then number two, you would have some kind of streamlined, compassionate policy that would allow these people to stay here with a work visa, but they would be documented, Charles. This is the big thing. The liberals changed the definition. They don't like aliens, right? That's bad. They don't like illegal. That's bad. So they're all, hey, they're undocumented. Well, I'm saying, as somebody who's more right of center probably, how about we do the documentation part? Can we at least do that? Can we know who's here? Because guess what? You go anywhere in the United States, and this is a big thing with voter ID right now. People are flipping out. You mean you want me to have an ID to vote? I mean, that's preposterous. It's racist, right? So, but, you go to the liquor store, Charles, and you look, like you're 22, 23. They're going to card you, man. They're going to say, hey, I want to see some ID. You can't buy this beer unless you got an ID. Duh. You go to the registry of motor vehicles, they're going to want ID up the wazoo, brother. So I'm confused that there's not more common sense consensus on this issue from like-minded libertarians, conservatives, progressives, whoever they are out there across the spectrum to say, look, we're not we're not a nation that doesn't welcome immigrants here. And by the way, just one more thing here, and then I'll let you talk. The word immigrant has now been hijacked to mean anyone who comes here, all right, from anywhere without any kind of documentation. In other words, nobody has really defined the difference. Like I said, the undocumented word comes up because it's a softer word, but now I'm just hearing immigrants. You don't like immigrants. You don't understand that immigrants are coming here. Well, here's the deal. All right. People moving freely between countries wasn't really a thing until recently, in the sense that, gee, if I don't like living here, I can just go to another country and live there. Yes, but there's always been a process. Why do I have to get a passport if I go somewhere? right? If I go to Canada, I'm going to get stopped at their checkpoints, man, and I'm going to get 50 questions about why I'm going to Canada. I don't know if you've ever seen videos, but they are those Canadian mounted police, whatever they're called up there. There's probably not the Mounties working the border, but maybe they are. I don't know. The point is it's a stringent policy because it's a sovereign nation, and that's their right to do whatever they feel. I may think it's a little harsh. I may want to go to Toronto for the weekend, and they're making it difficult. But that's what they choose to do. America right now is choosing to do virtually nothing. And there's a crisis down there, and we can get into the opioids and the fentanyl and some other things. And we can talk about, what the libertarians say about legalizing drugs and how that will alleviate the problem. But I've got more on that, but I'll let you jump in here.
Well, the first thing, as you kind of pointed out, is that, people coming to and fro from the countries wasn't really that big of a thing until recently. Some are going to push back to that, but I'm going to shut this down real quick. Okay, if you go back to like the old days, like 1800s,
Yep.
you had people who could come and go more freely that didn't have necessarily things like passports and all this junk. So if the argument is, oh, well, all the ancestors came here pretty much the same way, and then they were allowed to be accepted into the country. If you're going to go to that argument, the immediate pushback is going to be, okay, there were a lot of things that were done different back in those times. Bob Dylan said it best. The times are a-changing. Okay. A lot of things have happened since the days that people were coming over on ships. First of all, there's airplanes. Second of all, you've got all the issues with people trying to sneak in Trojan horse style terrorist stuff. Whether you believe that we're in that much of an imminent danger or not, things like 9/11 change the way the world works. Okay. It's just the modern society thing. And if the argument is just take us back to the way things were in the 1800s, it ain't going to go that well. No other developed country in the world practices things that way. Furthermore than that, you brought up the foreign policy stuff still being the issue, and it absolutely is. But there's also the issue of where they've had, people that have come across the southern border that aren't from any South American country at all.
Correct.
Okay. So as long as we still have this problem where we're trying to go after countries like Venezuela and this and that, and they come this direction to escape it all, then you're going to have the opportunity for someone who might be associated with Al-Qaeda, that might be associated with ISIS, to take advantage of that because they know there's this, group that want to get in. So, okay, let's hide a few into this group and sneak them on across. Yeah, that's another problem. Another problem, as you pointed out, are the people who live along the southern border, that may have immigrated here legally, and now they're having their own property attacked. It's costing them a loss. I'll put it this way. I'm going to equivalent that to a lot of the people during like the whole George Floyd type stuff who were black small business owners, lived in that community, but then had their stores burned down by protesters who were upset over George Floyd.
Right.
There's something about, an emotional reaction. Why are there so many more legal Hispanics who are getting upset with this sort of thing? It's because they know what they whether it was convenient, you could say there should have been reforms, whatever, but they went through the process the way the process was designed. They did everything they could to immigrate here legally. And then someone, who came from the same, roots they came from, shared those same struggles, turns around and then basically is the one that stabs them in the back and causes hard times on them. It's not white privilege per se. It's not, a bunch of white people that came and, ransacked their property or killed cattle or whatever. It's people who came from the same, backstory that they did. They, whether it be Mexico or some country further south. That's got to be an emotional, response. They're like, why are you doing this to me? You know, there's a lot of problems here. So absolutely, the foreign policy stuff should come to an end. You know, we shouldn't be squeezing these countries to where they have to come in this direction. But the irony, though, to me about the Biden administration was the Biden administration came in from day one. Basically, we're going to undo everything Trump did.
Yep.
And that included the stuff at the border. And for the longest time there was just this overpour of people showing up at the border. You heard about it a lot, especially in Texas. Okay. Yes. And they opened the floodgates for this, more or less. They pretty much told all the people to come right on in. They got such an overpour. The facilities were way too overcrowded. There were people trying to record. I think it was Ted Cruz trying to record just how overcrowded the facility was. And then there's all these people trying to stop him from doing so. Meanwhile, recording under the Trump administration was fair game. Of course, you could pretty much go in and do that anytime you wanted. But under the Biden administration, no, sir, we can't let you film here. Sorry.
Right.
Okay. So they started all of this.
Yeah.
Only to then turn around and now tell everyone, don't come because we're going to deport you. I mean, if that isn't something that is Democrat 101, I don't know what is.
Right.
They literally, to anyone out there who's a person of color, if you're watching this video, if there's one thing you need to take away from this video, it is that you can't trust the Democrat Party. Doesn't mean you can always trust the Republican Party either.
Right.
But you can't trust the Democrat Party. They don't give a rat's ass about these issues that they run on. They bring them out every 4 years. They trot them out. They try to pull at your heartstrings, talk about those hardships that the people of color go through. They run on it. And then the minute they're in office, they just shaft you to no end. Yeah. I mean, Obama did it in 2008 and 2012. Now you've got Joe Biden doing it. Hillary Clinton would have done it had she been elected in 2016.
Oh, yeah.
The list goes on and on. Bill Clinton ran back in the 90s. He was going to be the blue-collar president. And at the time, people thought he did a decent job. But, of course, we all know today what his big claim to fame was other than Monica Lewinsky, and it was NAFTA.
Yeah.
Okay, and how many people did that screw over? Let's also talk about the crime bill. We know what that did, right? So they don't care. They simply don't care. If you're Hispanic, you're brown, they don't care. If you're an illegal immigrant, they're only doing this to try to win votes. They're going to do it every 4 years. And if you're brainwashed enough to elect them, if you're sheep herded into voting for them, when they take office, it's old news. They don't care anymore. They don't care anymore. I mean, we've been seeing that time in and time out. So if the argument is just it's a Republican type thing, no, it's both sides of the aisle. The only difference is the Democrats just pretend to be in favor of something so they can win your vote. Both sides don't really want this massive illegal immigration. They want it up to a point. But then when they realize that it's becoming more than they can handle, you get what Kamala just did. No, don't come. We're going to turn you away. We're going to deport you. We're going to send you back home. And we all know if that was Donald Trump who went to Guatemala and told everyone when he got there, look, we're overcrowded. We've got too much. We've made America great again, but don't come because we're going to deport you. You got to do it legally. We got to have legal immigration. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be a wonderful thing. We're going to send you back. If that was Donald Trump, what the hell would have happened, Dave?
All hell would have. I mean, the media went. Everybody. It would have been. I mean, he would have gotten banned off of Twitter again if that's possible. I mean, I mean, it's just. Look, you made a lot of points there, and I'm taking notes today, which I typically don't do. But I'm really kind of fired up about this issue. Because I'm really actually mad at libertarians on this issue. And the reason I'm mad is because they don't make sense to me on this. They completely don't make sense. They say things like, hey, they should just let them in because we need the labor and they need a better life and we can provide it. Charles, are things looking up in America right now, even prior to this? I mean, Trump is starting to look a bit like a rock star compared to what's been happening over the last 5 months. Gas prices are up $1 where I'm at, and that's a big deal. From back, and I took pictures November 3rd because I wanted documentation, and it's about $1.04, $1.05 higher. All right, for whatever reason. I understand COVID. I understand supply chain, but COVID was bad back. It was probably worse back in November. I'm thinking, right? So things are changing. Policies are changing. You know, we're getting hacked all over the place. Our infrastructure is very fragile right now. So, you know, hey, you can look at who was the president. This is what you do. You make an assessment based on policy. Is your life better? Remember Ronald Reagan? His famous line is, "Are you better off?" And everybody back in those days was like, "Hell yeah!" And 49 state landslide. All right. Yep. Whether you liked Reagan or not, I was alive. I got to tell you, the 80s were pretty good, especially in retrospect. All right. So a couple of things I want to address. You mentioned 9/11, right? And the accusation, and I think it's a correct accusation, is we destabilized entire countries. And a lot of those people got ticked off, but we also financed them. We also allowed them to basically train in our country to do those attacks. All right. That's pretty much truth. But here's, again, this goes along with my border premise, where the people on the border didn't do that. The people on the border just living their lives. The rank and file of humanity didn't do that, Charles. What they were doing on September 11th, which God help us, is a 20-year anniversary coming up. They went to work. They went to work that day. All right. And 3,000 people died in the process of doing what they're supposed to do, not being part of a government agency. Most of those people just going to work, not involved with making foreign policy decisions in the Middle East, okay, or Saudi Arabia or anywhere. So again, the rank and file of this country pay big time for the mistakes of the administrative state. Some people call it the deep state. Eisenhower, as you like to reference, called it the military-industrial complex. Boy, was he prescient and right, you know, half century plus before. So good on him, but we're not doing anything to change it. Libertarians talk about cheap labor. Okay, these people come over and yeah, they get jobs and they better themselves, but everybody else pays higher health insurance. Schools are overwhelmed. Administrators have to teach English to kids when they were just trying to focus on, hey, how do we get through this school year? Our budgets are already strained. I mean, they've cut, look at all the programs, the arts programs, the music programs, all the different things schools have had to cut, Charles, because they've got to make ends meet, right? Even with the bloated budgets. Now, again, we can make an argument about private schools and home schools, but all I'm saying is these kids are going to use resources when they get here. The adults are going to use a lot of resources when they get here. It's like you're putting, you know, it's like some guy trying to hike up a mountain and you're just loading him. You're putting, you know, cement bags on his back as he's walking up that mountain. And yeah, we're a tough, resilient bunch of people. Sometimes we can make the trip. I wanted to note that I do believe in the 10th Amendment. I believe in states' rights. In fact, I believe in states' rights now that we need them more than any time, I think, in our history, in our country. In Texas, I don't know if you've heard, Texas has decided, government, federal government, you screwed up. You don't want to build this border wall. Governor Abbott, I think, announced yesterday that he is building a border wall. And he gave this speech, right? Whether you like Governor Abbott or not, I don't know the man. I understand that Texans, I think, like him. They keep reelecting him or whatever. He got a standing ovation when he announced that he was going to build a border wall. All right. And guess what? Whether it's Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, I don't think they're going to be, you know, doing much in California. But the point is, if you're a sovereign state, it is not only your right to be able to do this, it's your obligation to do this, to protect your citizens. If you think your state's under attack, then guess what? You need to protect your state. And, you know, there are going to be people that say, oh, this isn't as big of a threat, or these people aren't, you know, it's not like they've got guns or weapons. No, they don't. But the people on the other side who are doing a lot of things like human trafficking, they do. All right. And who's to say, as you mentioned, what we call OTMs, people that are other than Mexican, come up through that southern border. And are we willing to risk 1 or 2 or 5 or 10? I'm not. I want a secure border. I want a country that I can feel safe in. I know it's a dumb analogy, Charles, but I have a door on my house, and I have a security system, and I have a lock. All right. And I program that security system every night before I go to bed. And you know what that does? That gives me peace of mind. That's safety. That makes me feel like, gee, I can sleep well. My family is safe. My 7-year-old son is safe. Not to say I live in a super dangerous area, but there've been some stuff, you know, there's been some stuff that's happened. So you take precautions, right? It's not crazy. One more point that I want to get in here before I forget to say this. George Floyd. You briefly mentioned George Floyd. The cause of death for George Floyd, it was debated a little bit. They did one autopsy, then they did another autopsy. Family didn't like the first autopsy, so they got a second one. They got a better one for, if you want to look at it for political purposes or better spin, that Chauvin and the pressure that he put on his neck was the deciding factor. Didn't have enough airflow, was restricted, and that could have caused George Floyd to die. George Floyd had, I believe, 4 to 5 times, I don't want to say the legal limit, because there's no such thing as a legal limit of fentanyl in his system, mixed with, in other words, a doctor said 3 micrograms would be the amount that you could say, yeah, that killed him. George Floyd had 12 micrograms mixed with methamphetamine. All right. Now, I don't know if that killed him, but here's the point I wanted to make. What comes through the southern border completely unstopped, unfettered, just comes over that border. Now, we can talk about drugs, right? We could talk about the drug war and the failed drug war and so forth. I don't know if I want my citizens in this country, and this sounds like an authoritarian here a little bit, so excuse me. I don't know if bringing large quantities of fentanyl across the border is a good idea. We already have an opioid crisis where doctors are already like drug dealers in this country, because they don't want to treat symptoms. What they do instead is, hey, we've got some great painkillers here to get you addicted to. Big Pharma strikes again, right? Little partnership between doctors and Big Pharma. Now, I'm all for legalizing cannabis, recreational. I'm fine with that. This is where we have to recognize, Charles, that there's a difference between certain types of drugs. All right. And I heard someone say, if we had a secure border, George Floyd might still be alive today. He might still be alive, because the combination of those two things, whether it was Chauvin and the fentanyl combined, you can't say the fentanyl helped the situation, right? No. Can't say it was good that, you know, he was hopped up in all this fentanyl. If you made it a little bit more difficult, because that's where it comes from, Charles. It comes from south of the border. So you got a guy, he gets all this national attention last year. The whole country's up in arms. It divides people by race. Was it worth it? Was it worth it to do all of that to the country over, you know, hey, we're not really going to secure it. And this was under Trump, by the way. So obviously stuff was still getting through, because they always say, hey, all of these highly addictive substances are coming over. And I get the whole freedom mantra of, you know, hey, it's your body, it's your life. You want to do this stuff to it, fine. I don't know, Charles. I'm starting to get a little bit worried about this drug policy, which says, you know, which equates certain things. And I remember Tulsi Gabbard. I'll end on this and I'll let you take it here. Tulsi Gabbard was on with Sean Hannity one time, and they were talking mostly about foreign policy stuff and some of her opinions that he agreed with and disagreed with. For some reason, Sean Hannity cornered her about if she wanted to legalize all drugs. And I believe Tulsi Gabbard at one point in her career said that she did want to legalize all drugs, but she wouldn't say it. Hannity, and it was very awkward. It was one of the only times I've ever seen Tulsi Gabbard look a little, like she had been rattled. And the reason for that, Charles, is I think the majority of the population wants to cut people slack when it comes to pot, obviously alcohol. We've been down that road and we're not going to ever go down that road again. But people look at things like fentanyl and the southern border, and these people are the drug cartels are making a ton of money. And one more thing for my libertarian friends. So what about human trafficking? What about all right, say we legalize all the drugs and there's no drug war anymore. So is there a human war? When do we go after? I mean, at what point do we stand up as responsible citizens and say, you know what, this behavior over here isn't a desirable outcome? And this is what we don't do anymore. And this goes back to morality and character and trying to live your life as a respectable citizen and thinking that my fellow citizens driving cars around are hopped up on this cheap, even though street value, it's really expensive, but they're hopped up possibly on this substance that just gives them Superman qualities and powers. And this is probably why, I don't want to say this, but maybe this is why Chauvin applied so much pressure, to his head, because maybe he felt as though this guy had superhuman strength, or he thought he had superhuman strength. I don't know. I wasn't there, and I don't. This is a difficult thing to talk about because it really divided the country, and I don't want to throw gasoline on the fire here, but maybe Chauvin would still be here. And maybe we wouldn't have had this national debate where the country unravels for months. And then we have this court case that was decided by the news media and by President Obama and whoever else who said they better come up with the right verdict. Whether you like Chauvin or not, that's not how you do. It's innocent until proven guilty. It's not guilty in the public. And then anyway, that's right. Sorry, man. I went off on a lot of different things there.
Well, hitting on the drug policy thing there, number one, and this is my thing, there's a lot who believe we should just legalize all the drugs. And my take on it is this, I would say definitely marijuana, but so legalize cannabis, possibly, even though this gets into addictive territory right here, possibly even cocaine.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason that I'm just stopping at those two is the way I look at it is people turn to the cheap alternatives because there's such a war on those two.
Right.
If people were able to just kind of more or less settle for what they already got. Marijuana is the one that keeps you calm. Obviously, cocaine is the upper of the two. It gives you the energy, this and that, but that being said, people want to buy that. They want the feeling. It's just like how they wanted to buy alcohol during Prohibition.
Right.
The problem then became just like during Prohibition, you didn't just go to someone who was selling quote unquote, alcohol, and they handed you something that would be the quality of what my Jim Beam is over here right now. Okay. Yeah. When you were buying moonshine, you might be getting it from a good source, but to get the good stuff, you had to pay top price. If you're working more on a budget, because there's such a war against it, you're turning to cheap alternatives. And then you got a lot of what people called back in those days, bathtub gin.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You got crap. So that's what I'm going to equivalent to things like the whole fentanyl, meth, things that even heroin, even though heroin can be made, it's made from poppy, which is natural, but these real hard drugs, I don't think there would be this kind of market for them if it wasn't so expensive to go out and buy a little pot or whatever, right?
Right.
Just wouldn't have that market. So if they closed up the war on drugs and at least just started with those, I think you'd see a massive downtick. This is just my opinion. I'm no expert, but I'm putting two and two together here. You know how many people that this is the propaganda that they always use for why we shouldn't have marijuana legal. They say it's the gateway drug.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen, it only becomes a gateway drug because people want to get high. They want to escape the day-to-day realities that stress them out, cause anxiety, give them, all this stress. That's why they drink. It's why people go home and drink too.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
there's people who want to find that calm or relieve that stress, and then they get in, or some people just want to get high. I mean, this is call space. You got the stoners out there too.
Yeah.
But there's people who want to do that, and then there's these cheaper alternatives, and then they go to the party, they try it out, and they're like, oh, okay, well that wasn't too bad, and then they start down that path. So that, I think if you change that would make a big difference. But to touch on a few other things, you brought up the libertarians pointing towards the cheap labor and things like that. We obviously have jobs that there's a lot of people in this country that don't want to do anymore, like picking fruit and vegetables and things of that nature. That's what they always point to, is that, oh, if you didn't have all these Hispanic people out here picking your fruit and vegetables, and you stick the white guy out there, he would absolutely wilt. I'm not going to say that isn't true. It pretty much is in today's society. But I'm going to say this too. If you don't think that white people could do that kind of job, historically, you would be wrong. Right. I mean, it's been done in the past. Where do you think the term redneck ever came from? Literally, the white people were out there working the farm, working the land, and they got sunburned, and they're always bent over like this because they're picking something. They're picking the crops. They're using the hoe, and they're picking up the land to get ready to plant things. They were working the ground. They're always bent over. Their neck always got sunburnt. That's why they were rednecks.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
That's where this whole thing came from. It can be done. It's just that society, the way things have changed, you don't have that many people doing that sort of thing anymore. A lot of those farms really dried up around the Depression era. There was massive drought in the country. Okay. Yeah. And a lot of those farms went belly up. Okay. When the farms went belly up, the New Deal took a lot of those people who used to work the land, and they put them on these kind of jobs out, like with the Tennessee Valley Authority.
Oh yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
They transitioned people to jobs not working the land anymore. When that happened, you lost a lot of that labor that you once had. Okay, so people became more into the workforce than farmers and cotton pickers and things like that. Okay, you lost a lot of that. So the argument that it can't be done is just wrong. It's not going to be a very easy transition to make.
Yeah.
The other argument would be, well, they could get away with paying these people below minimum wage, this and that. Okay, but look, the left ain't going to settle for that.
No.
Okay, the left wants minimum wage to go right on up.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the argument is, well, it's going to help keep costs low, you're not going to be able to get away with that either, because this seems to be one kind of issue on not banning illegal immigration or being more okay with it, that the left and libertarians kind of have some common ground on. But they're going to fall apart when you get to the whole how much rights they should have when they get to the country, and then what their wages should be, and the cost of living. The wages they're making aren't going to afford to get X, Y, and Z. So, Dave, laying all that out, now you get into something me and you talked about when we've discussed in the past about the oppression of different minorities.
Right.
And remember, when me and you talked about it, one of the examples that was given to me was, well, you can't look at the legal immigrants. You got to look at the illegal community to see where the oppression is really at. Yeah. You remember when we talked about that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I said it then. I'm going to say it now. The problem is just that they're illegal. If you're here illegally, then you're trying to keep your head under radar anyway. Okay. Yeah. If I'm living under the radar and I'm not paying proper taxes, I'm living, in a way kind of off the grid. I'm here, but you don't really know I'm here. Okay. Right. You are going to be far more likely to be living a life of poverty. Now, if we've learned one thing from people who grow up in utter poverty, it's that usually they turn in a lot of cases to a life of crime because it's about the only way to become successful.
Yeah.
If you need a movie example, go watch Scarface. Okay. That's all I'm going to say. But you go to places like Chicago. Yeah. Go examine places like the hood in Chicago. Go look at places like the projects and Cabrini Green, to label one in particularly, where people like the Gangster Disciples came from. This is really poor communities who were down on their luck. And you had some who said, well, we might be poor, but we're going to do what we got to do, and we're going to make an honest living. For a lot of the younger people, though, they saw the world around them. They got that Tony Montana idea that the world is yours, and they're like, I'm never going to be anything trying to play this game fair. And as they say, crime don't pay unless you ask the mob. Yeah. So what's the path out of it? They then turn to the streets, slinging drugs, operating with gang members. That already happened with people who were legal immigrants, who were living here and legal U.S. citizens. If that's happening with legal citizens,
exactly,
you've got to know someone living off the radar if they want to really be successful, because there is a immigration process that, not everyone's going to get citizenship.
Right.
Okay. So the really only way that you can climb that ladder and have money is when you turn to this. So there's the crime aspect there too. And you've got all these people. I don't think it's unjust to necessarily feel this way, David. Doesn't mean, it's like, Trump said when he was criticized. This doesn't mean every immigrant does this. It doesn't mean everyone who comes across the southern border turns to a life of crime.
Right.
But if I'm a legal U.S. citizen and all I hear are politicians talking about, that they come here with an act of love or whatever, and then someone who was illegally in the country, killed my daughter, attacked my property,
right,
tried to hurt me, tried to hurt a loved one. I've mentioned this before. Under normal circumstances, if you rear end someone, they say it's your fault.
Yeah.
Okay. But my wife even had a situation a few years back where there's a guy who was driving on the road that didn't even have a driver's license. Turns out he was in the country illegally. Yep. And he just slammed on the brakes out of nowhere. And it was raining like hell that day. And she wound up hitting him in the back end. Now, it didn't do very much damage to his van. It did more damage to her car, but it wasn't, unrepairable. It was repaired. But they still wrote her a ticket.
Yeah.
Which I told her, she didn't listen to me. She listened to my mother-in-law, unfortunately. But I told her, I was like, you should have fought it in court, because there's been instances where, a 18-wheeler was hit head on by a car full of drunk college kids. They came across a double yellow line, hit an 18-wheeler head on, killed every one of them in the car. Okay.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
But the driver was faulted because he was running illegally over his 14-hour clock. He had faked his logbooks to keep driving and making money. They said it was his fault because if he was where he was supposed to be, which was parked and taking a break, he couldn't have been there to hit. So I equivalent that to, if you're not even supposed to be in the country, nor do you have a driver's license,
right,
and you're not supposed to be on the road, you wouldn't have been there for me to hit you. But yet you look at what took place there. My wife's now paying a ticket because there's someone on the road that hasn't even passed South Carolina's requirements to get a driver's license. Yeah. I mean, you've got that stuff going on every day. So I don't think it's unfair for people who live here legally to see this going on and then hear all these politicians trying to talk about how we're going to protect them, this and that, and feel a little upset over that. There is a justification there because, as you point out, when people say, bring them in, we need the cheap labor and we can take care of them, we're not taking care of the people who already live here.
Correct.
The basic, human rights or you know, things we should have a right to as human beings, it's being taken away more and more every day. Okay.
Yeah.
We're supposed to have a guaranteed right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if you want to go through what's been taking place, first of all, you know, this is something I'm kind of more with on the left. No one has guaranteed right to health care.
Right.
Now, me and the libertarians are going to agree. I don't think the current government could run universal health care very efficiently. They're too bought off. They're too corrupt. It would be a mess. You'd need a whole new clean slate if you ever want something like that to even possibly be done right.
Yeah.
But it's still not being done. Okay. You've got that. You've got a problem where people, you know, get more and more their freedoms taken away every day. Their jobs are being taken away. Their wages aren't growing. Their unions are getting busted up. I mean, look, constitutionally, you don't even get all your constitutional rights anymore. They've been infringing upon our Fourth Amendment right. They're infringing upon your Second Amendment right. They infringe upon your First Amendment right. They're censoring more people on social media. They're telling you what you can and cannot say. Even worse, since we got COVID, now they're telling you where you can and cannot go.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, good Lord, it's ridiculous. They're not doing right by the people who are already here. How do you figure that they're going to be able to just take more and more and more people in? I look at it like this, and this has been my entire premise, and this is what I've said for the longest time. If it were me and they gave me just the option to do something about the immigration system and will do, you give me the complete option, I can do whatever I want to fix.
Yeah.
There should absolutely be increased security at the southern border.
Right.
No, that is my opinion. I say we need to build some sort of barrier, increase more border patrol, even, and this is, you know, I guess pushed back by some, but take all the troops, bring them home, and actually have troops do what troops were intended to do and guard our country.
There you go.
I mean, is that unheard of? I thought that's what our military was for, was to protect our homeland.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Dave, but they're not protecting my backyard in Iraq.
Correct.
They're not protecting, you know, that Texas farmer or Texas rancher or whatever that lives near the southern border when they're sitting, you know, looking at a North Korean every day.
Yes.
These things aren't, it's not happening. So bring the military back, let them guard the southern border. But I would then give, like you said, get people on the record. I would tell every person who was here, just make an announcement. Here's what we're going to do. You've all got anywhere, I'd say, between 90 days to 6 months, just because you got to give this thing a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Everyone that's here undocumented, come forward, turn yourself in, get on the books with us. You will then go under a 3-year probationary period where you're granted temporary citizenship.
Right.
Because the big argument is that they came here for a better life. So we're going to see who really did and who didn't. If you come here, you turn yourself over, we give you 3-year temporary citizenship, you're on probation. That means if you're caught dealing drugs, if you're caught operating in any kind of gang affiliated activity, if you're committing domestic violence, if you're caught driving drunk on the road or under the influence of something where you could kill other people on an open road, things of that nature. You know, if you're caught murder, assault, you know, theft, whatever. Okay. If you're not here with the intentions we're all being told you came here for, then your citizenship is revoked and you're deported. Anyone who gets through the 3-year probationary period, you're then granted full citizenship. But I think that only works properly when you try to fix the whole problem. And that problem is going to be really securing the southern border. And then also ending that foreign policy stuff that we talked about in the beginning, so that there is no reason why they should have to come here. And understand this too, okay? If we do build America back to being the #1 in the world, that old Americana, this is the place where you can come to achieve the American dream. For the people who say that we're putting the squeeze on the South American countries, they're right. They're right.
Yeah.
That's why they're still coming here, even though America's in decline.
Right.
But even if you take that pressure off and then we fix America and do what Trump said and make America great again, okay,
Yeah.
even if you do this, you do realize a lot of people are still going to try to come here because it's that land of opportunity.
Right.
That they realize, okay, well, yeah, America is back to being the America of old. This is where a man could come and have a chance again. So I want to come. It's not like if you just take that stranglehold off and we fix our country, you're never going to hear about this issue again. It's going to continue.
Yeah.
And so, in my opinion, I think perhaps it should be an easier process to immigrate here.
Mhm.
But as far as the cheap labor and things like that, we've already got enough problems right now. If you look at the job market does not say we need more cheap labor.
No.
The job market says we need more skilled labor.
Yeah.
There's jobs that are floating around that pay decent wages, and you can't get anyone to do them. And I'm not talking because right now there's a big issue on this too. That's why Governor McMaster in South Carolina took the $600 away from the unemployment.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of retail jobs and fast food jobs and things like that can't get anyone. But it's not just them. You've got other jobs. Everyone is trying to hire help right now.
Yeah.
And it's from unskilled labor to skilled labor. But before COVID, there was a massive problem with people who were not skilled to take welding jobs, to take automotive repair, to be a CDL driver, to do all these different things, to do machine tool, body work repair on car. People didn't have a skill. You need more people to be able to do that. And we haven't even been able to take care of that problem yet. So we don't, it's a supply and demand type issue as well. And honestly, you got to look at it like this. When we've already got a problem inside the country right now, where there's more and more people who live homeless every day. We're not taking care of our veterans when they come home from war. We've got people that can't hire on to skilled jobs because they never received training to be able to do it. Blame that if you want on education system.
Yeah.
There's more and more people who are already here, living here legally, falling into a big pothole of poverty every day.
Yeah.
Every day. Why do you need to add more people to this current situation who aren't bringing skill with them and are just going to be far more likely to fall into that pothole?
Right.
That makes no sense to me. I understand some of the argument in principle or from a moral standpoint, but it's time to come to grips with the fact America is not what we heard about the home of the free and land of the brave being back post World War II when we had a big economic boom.
Right.
The times changed.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for the better.
I know.
So when you factor all that in, bringing more people in who aren't going to add to the skilled labor force when you've already got more and more of your own citizens falling into poverty, that's just absolutely ridiculous. That would be like, Dave, if I had to give an analogy, and I'm famous for these, that would be like if you and your wife had your home and your kids, and you were to the point that you were riding a razor's edge from losing your house. You could barely feed your family. You barely made ends meet. And you didn't have enough to really hardly take care of you and your kids now. So what do? Let's go adopt 5 or 10 other kids.
Right.
How the hell does that make any sense? It doesn't. It's a supply and demand issue. There's only so many resources we have as a country. If you look at a lot of the resources in the world, you listen to other people, resources are drying up worldwide anyway.
Yep.
I mean, when you do the math on everything, when you try to do too much of something, for the people who don't think we should be the world police, we shouldn't be the world charity case either.
Right.
Flat out. We've got our own country. We've got our own problems. and you don't need to be worrying about everyone else's problems when you're not even taking care of your own. It's like that, don't complain about your neighbor's grass when yours is 3 feet tall.
Right.
It's so backwards. We're not taking care of our own country.
Yep.
We've already got people who were born here, lived here their whole life, can't get a good job because they don't have skill to do it.
Yeah.
You don't need to bring more people in who are just going to add to that problem. And it's not racist. It's not bigoted. People can say, well, because they're brown and you're white and you're saying that. Okay, cut out the snowflake woke crap over here. Okay. Yep. This is just an honest discussion. And if you want to look at things through the lens of reality, not political correctness, emotion, and feeling, then you're going to understand there's a necessity here. The necessities need to be taken care of. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to be able to add more problems and take care of those.
Yeah.
I mean, God, Dave, am I drunk? Am I completely off, in la la land? What? Am I just not making sense, or does this make sense to you too?
Well, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I don't know if I told you this already or if I was talking to somebody else about this, but McAllen, Texas, which is right on the border. It is like one of the larger border towns, just elected a Hispanic mayor, Republican, for the first time in their history, I believe. Not only is he Republican, but he's Hispanic. And one of the things he wants to do, Charles, can you imagine this? He wants to secure the southern border. He wants to be part of a coalition of mayors along the southern border that say, you know what? We'd like our town to be a sovereign place. Again, you mentioned this, and I think is really important. See, people will say, Charles, you're just trying to militarize our southern border, brother. You're going to bring in the hardware. You're going to bring in those tanks. You're going to bring in, guys wearing, body armor. They're going to look real mean and nasty. Guess what? That's what that's actually designed to do. Hate to tell you this, but people who might, want to do us harm, they see those guys and they see that hardware, and I think they're going to do a little U-turn and go back. Now, for all those families, and again, we're a compassionate nation, Charles. We're overly compassionate. We're compassionate beyond what I think is necessary at this point, because as you mentioned, we have people in our own country that are having a difficult time. Homelessness in every major city is through the roof. A lot of these woke, blue type places where, everybody's welcome and so forth. And, you can squat here and stay here. That's just perpetuating a problem. Nobody is going in for solutions. They're just doing this whole, hey, you can hang out here and we'll be nice to you and so forth. And you can live in poverty and we'll help you just stay in poverty. I mean, look, in years ago, I think the goal of the country was to get better, right? To say, okay, we've got a good standard of living. I think people need a better standard of living. You mentioned healthcare. Look, I'm not against a system or a solution to that problem. I'd like to see states get in on it. I'd like to see local municipalities design programs for people in their state, not a one-size-fits-all government mandated thing. But if there was an effective program that people wanted to opt into, I'm with you, brother. I'm not against healthcare. But again, you're going to have people coming into this country, Charles, who need stuff. And we've got people here who already needs. This is math. I know math has become controversial lately. I don't know if you've been reading any articles that 2 + 2 is maybe not something that we can say anymore because we figured it out. And that makes us, we're white people, and, math doesn't come easy to other people, which I think is inherently a racist statement to say that somebody else can't figure out simple math. But the math here is that we only have a certain amount of resources. And again, this just unfettered illegal immigration drives wages down. It's a fact. You can't, if you're going to argue with that fact, you're going to lose if you're being intellectually honest. Now, Charles, in the month of April, we had 175,000 border crossings in the month of April. If it keeps up at that rate, which it doesn't appear. Maybe Texas will get on the ball. Maybe Arizona will get on the ball. New Mexico, I think, doesn't really care. I don't even know. California, as we know, doesn't really care. So say those two states, they can tamp down on some of this. They cut it in half, all right? You're still looking at maybe 100,000 a month. You got 1.2 million in 1 year. 1 year, all right? Now, I'm not saying Trump solved the whole thing, but Trump was definitely working. They fought Trump on the border wall like every day. Oh, he can't do this. He can't take funds from over here. He's trying to take funds from the military to put into the border wall, and people are like, you can't do that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this is actually trying to protect our country. Why can't he do that?
Yeah.
And there were private companies that were out there that were taking money from private citizens, and they were putting money in, hey, help us build the border wall. They built a lot of the border wall that the feds couldn't get done for whatever reason, or they were getting stopped. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in Texas. Imagine if Biden and his crew take them to court for building a border wall. I can see this happening. The political reality of doing that will, I think, be the end to the Democratic Party if they end up doing that, because there are people across the political spectrum, maybe not libertarians, but there are people across the political spectrum who think that, it's common sense, Charles. I hate to just throw that out there. I mean, that's not a scapegoat phrase. It's common sense to say, hey, again, like I said about securing my house, locking the door. And if I am going to have somebody in, I'd like to know who they are. And you talked about motivation. Trump, I think, was talking about a merit-based immigration program at one point. People are like, merit-based? That's racist. And I'm thinking to myself, how is it racist that we have job needs, right? So you mentioned nobody knows how to drive. Nobody has a CDL right now, Charles. This is why we have supply chain issues, because driving a truck ain't as easy as it looks, all right? An 18-wheeler takes a lot of skill to drive one of those puppies over the road and mile after mile and day after day. So we need people to do that stuff. Down here in Florida, we need HVAC people. Up north, they probably need, designers and engineers and architects or whatever. The big thing is, Charles, that there's only so much unskilled labor that we need. Not everybody. We have probably enough fruit pickers, even though we always hear how we need more fruit pickers because, Americans won't do, you mentioned this, that Americans won't do this work. This was something that George W. Bush, believe it or not, was putting out there when he was president, saying, because his immigration policy was kind of like, yeah, come on in. So, he was a neoliberal Republican. He was just, come on in. And a lot of people were thinking, really? I mean, I don't know. I think, like I said at the beginning of this, Charles, there's a moral component to all of this. There's a fairness component to this, where people like I mentioned, who are of Hispanic heritage, who are living, on the southern border, and they've built a life, and some of them have built a very modest life, and now they're seeing other people come in, and they're looking at those people and saying, hey, I didn't do it that way. I didn't do it that way. I did it. I had to apply for citizenship. I had to take a test, which, by the way, I think is good to know the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. I think those are things that people should understand when they come here, so they know how at least we were founded. We're not really operating that way now, but maybe they can be at the next school board meeting pointing out to somebody who's doing something that goes against our Constitution, to stand up and say, hey, I'm a Hispanic and I know more about this. I immigrated here from Mexico and I know more about this than you do, and put some of these people to shame. I mean, this is how our country was built. We had a strong identity. All right. Now, I know that's controversial to say this. It's not a white identity. Okay. It's not a black identity. It's not a brown identity. It's just an identity. America was an experiment. It was a thing. It was a concept. All right. And everybody is and was and still is welcome, Charles. But we had rules. And I know rules suck today. People, when they hear rules, a lot of libertarians, they want to be anarchists. They just want to freely run around and do business with each other and hand people money, and there's, you know, no speed limit, there are no stop signs. I'm thinking to myself, nah, that's not a world I want to live in. There's enough traffic accidents and problems as it is. And I'm saying that metaphorically.
Yeah.
I mean, if you challenge somebody, well, of course you need a stop sign, but that's not what I'm trying to say. Well, but here's the deal. I mean, what's more important right now, or it's equally important? You have a guide fence, a post somewhere that tells people that they can't go off the road, and then you have a fence along the southern border of the United States, and you have people protecting the homeland. You know, we have this thing called Homeland Security. It doesn't do anything, right? It's just another government agency. We could abolish all of those agencies and just have the military we've always had, maybe the Space Force, if you want to keep that, whatever. But the point is, you could have the Army down there, right? Definitely have the Army down there doing what the Army does, protect things, okay? Not shoot at people for no reason, not try to shoot first and ask questions later. Just their presence, like you mentioned, North Korea. Why? I mean, the force we have in South Korea is like a speed bump if North Korea gets going, right? Those guys, I wouldn't want to be those guys for any money on planet Earth if North Korea goes rogue. And we've got these troops stationed all over the world, Charles, protecting infrastructure in other countries, but they're not protecting infrastructure here in the United States. Other than, I'm sorry, I forgot, the Capitol. They are protecting the DC Capitol. At least they were. I don't know if they've left, but they are protecting the Capitol from people with Gadsden flags and American flags who show up, who are trying to redress grievances they may have had with their government, and they shoot military veterans when they breach their sacred building. Anyway, I just thought I would throw that in there. So they are protecting a little section, and because that's hallowed ground, that's the most sacred place on earth, is the U.S. Capitol.
Absolutely. Add to this real quick. You brought up, you know, the people who said, oh, you're going to make our border look all militaristic and it'll look mean and nasty. I got to say in response, what exactly do you think a military is supposed to look like? You know, if you want people to have an understanding that we're protecting the country and that we're going to make sure, you know, no one's coming across, you know, to do harm or whatever, I don't know that I want the hippie commune out there guarding it.
Stop! Okay. Stop! I got you. Or I'll shoot.
I mean, good Lord, you need a military is an army. Okay, you've got guns, you've got the body armor, you've got the military style gear. That's literally what that is. I mean that the optics aside, it's like we said about the cops before, about the cops looking so mean. You know, I'm not for arming the cops to the teeth. You know, and people are gonna say, oh, they're wearing all that black and it just looks scary. I mean, so what do we need to do to appease those optics for you? Do we need to make their BDUs pink? I mean, good God, if the optics, what do you think is supposed to look like? You know, if people don't have a certain level of fear in what they see, they tend to not take it very seriously. Like, would you be more afraid of a bunny, or would you be more afraid of you know, a Rottweiler dog? You know, because bunnies can bite too.
Sure.
But a bunny just looks so fluffy and cuddly, right?
Right.
Rottweiler dog could be a lovely dog, but he could also be a nasty dog too. The only thing is, you're going to look at one and say, okay, that thing might hurt or kill me. The other might just crap on me while I'm holding it or something. I don't know. But that the optics, you need a certain level of optics in military for one in the beginning, you know, but the overall point is they're supposed to be there. I don't think they would look that much different than the border patrol you've already got. The only
Right.
difference is you're actually using military in a way that it should, which is to protect our own country. Okay. As you pointed out, with the illegal immigration, if it's unchecked, they come in, they're cheap labor, that it's going to drive down labor. And to an extent, I would say, yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Okay. What you've got to consider in the mix of all that is that it's just like how we have the trade deficits right now, right?
Right.
When they can force people in countries who have a worse standard of living than us to work these longer hours with less benefits. That's why products come across from Mexico or coming in from China, and they're so much cheaper than American made. So
Yep.
the same thing, when you get people here who are working, if they can hire the undocumented immigrant, the illegal immigrant, and pay him below minimum wage or pay him under the table or whatever, then it becomes cheaper than hiring a legal citizen. And so the only way the legal citizen, if it's fair game to hire either or, the only way you can get away with hiring the legal citizen and he can get a job is when they start bringing the wages down and he's willing to accept it. But meanwhile, the cost of living keeps going up.
Right.
So you're pulling wages one direction. The cost of living is still going in another direction. And that it doesn't take a math genius to figure out there's a massive problem there either. When you're getting less and less money in your pocket and the cost of living keeps going higher and higher, you're going to start having deficits. And the only problem is, unlike our government, we don't get to just write checks that are going to bounce and get away with it. We don't get to borrow money from China to do it. Okay. We don't get to do things like that to keep our head above water and pay for what we need. If I could just get away with writing a check, no matter how much money I had in the bank to make my house payment and my wife, her car payment and all, if we could all do that, Dave, we could all afford some health insurance. Just print our own money out, send it over to them, but we can't do that.
Nope.
And so this, you hear the left talk about modern monetary policy. There is no modern monetary policy for the average blue collar guy. He's got how much money he's got, and that's pretty much it. He could try to go to a bank and get a loan. He could try to have a credit card. Sooner or later, those debts are going to catch up with you too. Yep. And if you can't pay those, then they're going to come after you and take whatever you have and sell it to try to collect their loss and their debt. So you can run on for a long time, to quote the old Johnny Cash song, but I'm going to put a slight twist on it. You can run on for a long time, but sooner or later, Uncle Sam will cut you down. I mean, the actual lyric is God will cut you down, but in this case, no, it'd be Uncle Sam. You're not going to keep getting away with it for forever. Sooner or later, if you can't pay those debts, you're going to wind up flat broke with nothing.
Right.
So you've got to find a way to grow wages in the labor force. And so this is my pitch to all the people who feel that the way things are being done towards the people who want to come here. I think one of the big criticisms to Trump when he said merit-based immigration, we do need people who have skills. We need people who might be a good scientist or whatever. We need people like that. But the history of the American dream, again, going back to that Americana thing, is that this is supposed to be the land where someone can come to make a success.
Right.
Okay. Right. And I don't think that the majority of Americans would agree, Republicans included, that we want to only have people who are already successful. You need that happy medium. But as we just discussed with supply and demand and with what resources are available, it hurts you to just let everyone come through. That's why if you look at the legal immigration process, that's a reason why they only allow so many people in per year. And you've got to figure out, okay, who do we take? Why do we take them? This and that. Okay. And again, maybe we could do some work to that. But at the end of the day, understand this. If the premise is they're coming here for a better life,
right,
you've got to fix these problems going down the list. You know, if you took on the project of fixing a car, you found some old car, you wanted to fix it up, you wanted to make it nice again so you could drive. And the very first thing that you really notice is that the engine is blown. You wouldn't start off by just changing the oil.
Nope.
There's a way you've got to go about the rebuild, steps you need to take first so that the whole concept makes sense. Otherwise, you end up backtracking. You do things multiple times. It's time and money being wasted at that point. It's an efficiency type thing. So if we're going to do this, this is the way I look at it. First of all, we need to come to an understanding about securing the border, ending the war on drugs, as we've discussed, quit putting squeezes on all these South American countries because the deep state, the big business, and all that want to get their hands on Venezuela's oil or whatever.
Right.
Cut all that out. We can legalize marijuana at the federal level. We could talk about possibly even cocaine or whatever. I think you'll see a downturn in the drug stuff that like fentanyl and a lot of that. Meth doesn't come across southern border that bad because you can make that in the trailer park. That ain't no problem.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. But when you start those things, I think you're going to see a little bit of progress being made. Right. Once you get past that, then comes the big step.
Yeah.
Rebuilding the country so that it is Americana, so that this is the place where you can come to achieve the American dream. You got to show that you're able to take care of the people you've already got here. You got to show that people can go through the education system and not come out with a 4-year degree that isn't worth the time it took to put it on a piece of paper.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. When you fix that problem and there's people who are able to get into the workforce, contribute to society, have decent income, good wages, and they can go out and buy a home or go out and buy a car and all these different things, then when you get to that point, you then have that America again. Then we can focus on looking at the immigration system, maybe trying to relax how hard it is to become a U.S. citizen and allow more people to come into the country to achieve that American dream. Because here's another thing, okay? I don't want someone to just come to the country in the hopes of achieving a better life for themselves and their family, only to get here and then be a working tool, basically, to basically be a substitute for slavery.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
where you work for basically nothing. You work yourself to the bone, you know, and even though you're getting paid something, whereas slaves didn't, you're literally put in a system where it's rigged against you and there's a glass ceiling and you won't break through it. And that's why we're letting you in.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that happen. I don't think that's fair just because it's cheap labor for my fruits and vegetables. You know, I take pride in the America I was always taught for a long time that we are.
Yeah.
And I take pride in, even if it was just propaganda, that this is the place where the little man can become something if he tries hard enough.
Right.
And that's the carrot in front of the donkey that keeps him moving.
That's it.
You know, and at some point you want to see that pay off. And if the argument is to just keep a system, allow them in, and it's basically rigged and it'll never happen, I don't. Again, that might be how some people feel, you know, that are more right leaning because they say we need the cheap labor. But you're not going to get the left on board with things like that. That humanitarian aspect that the left is so known for, they're going to absolutely come out in full force with that and saying, what's wrong with you, you greedy capitalist?
Right.
We can't have that. You know, this is why we need socialism and things like that. I mean, we all know where that's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
So again, that's my way of going about it. First, fix the foreign policy stuff.
Yeah.
You know, when you do that, I think you'll see a little bit of progress. Second, close the border. Third, rebuild the country so that someone can achieve that American dream again and have a chance. And then look at the immigration system and try to allow more people who want to immigrate here for a better life, that when they get here, they have an opportunity to have that better life.
Right.
Here's the final point. I think if you poll Republicans on that and give them that breakdown,
yep,
you're not going to have that many who disagree with it.
Yeah, no,
I don't think so. I think Republicans would agree with that. They would say, yeah, that seems like a fair system. And even if you throw, from my experience, my talking point about the people who are already here, 3 to 6 months, turn yourself in, get a 3-year probationary temporary citizenship. And then after 3 years, if you kept your nose clean, you're a citizen.
Yeah.
Most people I pitch that to don't have a problem with that. So what that tells me is that we could talk about Republican politicians possibly hating Hispanics. We could talk about, Republican politicians being racist. We could talk about Democrat politicians hating Hispanics low key. They just don't do it in front of cameras. Okay. We could talk about all that stuff, but that's the politician. So I don't think you can say that the Republican base or the Republican voters per se hate Hispanics, Mexicans, or illegal immigrants. They just want to see a fair system. They don't have that. I think if you poll them on all those things I just laid out, Republicans and Democrats would actually have a lot more common ground than most people realize. Give the final word to you and we'll wrap it up here.
All right, man. Yeah, no, I agree. One of the things, recently that was actually said to me was that they're the Republicans have this issue where they should like and embrace Mexicans, Hispanics. And I think, one of the reasons why I keep talking about this guy from McAllen, Texas, is because it flies in the face so hard of that. Because here you're just you're throwing out a stereotype, and whether it's to stir the pot or to make you think, all right, a mission accomplished. But the reality is, Charles, is that the Republican Party to me is now, I think, kind of moving in the direction of where the Democratic Party used to be back like during the JFK era. Now, this is what a lot of people don't understand, whether they call it the Overton window is moving around. I don't have much use for those that are on the hard left. I do like some of the progressive policies and ideas, so long as they're not authoritarian in nature. I can listen. And I think there are a lot of Republicans these days who are, they're kind of incorporating some of that into, their platform these days. So I think to broad brush people in such a sort of hardcore way is, I don't want to say politically tone deaf, but I think you need to go on the ground and find out what's happening. At the school board, I'm seeing it all over the place when it comes to teaching our kids not to like each other at a very young age because they have different skin color. Well, again, let's go back to the 60s when the Democrats and the civil rights movement, they had this guy by the name of Martin Luther King. You may have heard of him, kind of a sharp guy, right? And he talked about the content of your character versus, the color of your skin. People coming up from the southern border are going to have brown skin, most likely, right? Most of the time. Yeah. And if they don't, then you probably need to throw a flag like a referee and say, I think we have a problem on the field here. That's why we need to enforce the border and secure the border, because then we can kind of do that stuff. We have logistics, all right? I welcome everybody into this country, and I want everybody who comes here to succeed. But you know what, Charles? I think I also want them to contribute to the fabric of the country too. You talk a lot about people that are barely surviving or barely making ends meet, and we're just suppressing everybody now because you've already got people here that are struggling. You got 11 million people supposedly in the shadows. That used to be the report. Some estimate 21 million. So then you're going to bring in millions more to join them in the shadows. And I don't believe in blanket amnesty. Sorry, don't believe it. I believe in it. I think we ought to know who's here, know why they're here, give some people the benefit of the doubt. But, if we've deported somebody like 3 times because, of crime and whatever else, you talked about it in one of your rants, we just need to use a little bit of common sense and say, okay, this person, I don't think we want them in America. I mean, we gave them a shot, and we didn't even give them a shot fairly. We just let them stay here. So there are a lot of people, regardless of where they are on the political spectrum, who say, hey, I've worked hard my whole life. I was born here. Sorry, I know that's a stickler for a lot of people, that I was born on this piece of land, and that gives me some kind of rights that someone else doesn't have. That's a big argument I hear all the time. Well, okay, but then there are people born in Switzerland, right? And that's where they live, and that's where they were born. And so I don't understand how you can just say that everybody is like this global citizen that can just move around at will and not have any consequences, and you shouldn't worry about who they are and where they came from. I don't know how you run a country that way, Charles. I don't know how you run a business that way. It's a little bit perplexing. As much as I like to embrace a lot of libertarian orthodoxy, that issue gets me. That issue is a tough issue for me to reconcile with most libertarians who, I don't know, they don't seem to understand what's happening on the southern border, or they want to try to incorporate it into their overall philosophy. This is why I'm always going to be kind of radically independent. It's one of the things that I started with, and that's kind of who I am. I look at each issue and I say, okay, yeah, no, I know you're trying to incorporate it and make it fit into your box of issues, so you have this cohesive philosophy. But when the philosophy fails or can't explain to me in a common sense way how it's going to benefit the country and individual citizens and those who are trying to get here, keep in mind, there are human traffickers that are dumping kids over fences. I don't want that for the kid, and I don't want that for our country. Not to say that kid, we couldn't take care of that kid, but there's a reason that's happening. And it has more to do with cartels in Mexico and how they do business. Do we want to encourage that? Do we want to have a border that doesn't? Because no cartel is going to come to the fence and try to dump a poor little kid over who's been who's been ransomed, basically. And all of those things wouldn't occur if we had a very strong presence at that border. It's just a deterrent. I know people don't like deterrence, but guess what? We need deterrence. You had Chaz over in Portland there last year. Remember, autonomous zone set up. Okay, and I'm thinking to myself, in the United States of America, they've taken over a part of the city, and they're just allowing that to happen. And there are people who are like, good, great, it'll show the government that we mean business. I'm sorry, I'd like a little bit of law and order here. I know that this sounds totally radical and crazy, but I think I want the troops to move in, and I think I want them to break up. It's kind of like breaking up a party, Charles. All right, we're here. This was a loud party. You're up too late. It's 2 a.m. Charles needs to get up. He needs to go to work. Actually, you'd be at work, but besides the point, right? So we're here to stop all the noise and craziness. Or what happened to that, Charles? I don't know. But anyway, great talk today. I think maybe this might be worthy of a part 2, because there's just so much to deal with.
Oh yeah, there's still some areas that went untouched, but I think it's been a good discussion. I think anyone who watched all the way through would come away from it saying at least it was a fair conversation. We weren't just sitting here doing what a lot of people want to claim that the 2 white guys complaining about illegal immigration do, and that's just demonize the Hispanic folks. Nope. If you listen to the Democrats and you listen to the liberals, that was what this video would have been.
Yeah.
But for those who made it this far, I think most people would come away saying, even if they don't agree with everything that we said, it was at least an honest discussion, and points were raised that were serious concerns. Yeah. And as I always tell everyone, if you think you've got the case and the points that would prove me wrong, give them to me. You might just change my mind. What happened to talking and having conversations?
Yeah.
But I'm not going to go on another rant. I gave you the last word. Just made, those 2 points to wrap up the show here. It's been a pleasure to have you on again, Dave. Again, you can find David on YouTube and Rockfin, Live Free or Die. Link will be down below. You can also find him over on Twitter. We'll have a link to that down in the description box below. If you like the video, give it a good thumbs up. Drop the comments down below. We'll see you next time here on the Lone Wolf Podcast.